All right, today we are diving into a really powerful idea from Buddhist philosophy. And honestly, it might just completely change how you see the world. And maybe even more importantly, how you deal with your own stress and suffering. So let's jump right in. So it all kicks off with this really simple but, wow, really deep question. Have you ever stopped to wonder why we suffer so much over things we literally made up? I'm talking about things like names, labels, ideas, an insult from someone, or being stressed about a job title. These aren't, physical things you can hold. They're just concepts. So why on earth do they have such an iron grip on us? Well, the answer, according to the source material we're looking at, boils down to this one incredible concept, Phap Tuk De, which translates to conventional truth. Now, what is that? It's basically the reality we all operate in and day out. It's not the deep, fundamental truth of the universe. Not at all. Instead, it's the world that exists simply because we've all kind of agreed it does. You could almost think of it as a massive, shared story that we're all telling ourselves together. Okay, so if our reality is this giant shared story, what's it actually made of? What are the building blocks? Let's break it down. Just think about it for a second. A table, right? What is it really? It's just a bunch of wood, maybe some metal, stuck together. It only becomes a table because we have what the source calls a kwe uk, a convention, a shared agreement. We all agree to call that thing a table. And this applies to everything, cars, countries, even the idea of you and me. They exist in the way we think of them simply because we've all agreed on the labels. And this whole shared reality is basically built on two main types of these agreements. First, there are the names we give things. And second, and this is the important part, there are the meanings we attach to those names. So check this out. On one side, you have what's called Danche Ding, or name convention. This is super simple. It's just the labels. Table, car, mountain. Pretty neutral, right? But the real magic, or maybe the real trouble, happens on the other side. Nia Che Ding, the meaning convention. This is where we start piling on qualities and judgments. We don't just see a mountain, we see a high, beautiful mountain. We don't just see a person, we see a good person or a bad person. See? It's that second layer of meaning where all of our emotions and suffering get tangled up. And that brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. The world we live in, the one we navigate every single day, is built almost entirely out of these conventions. And so much of our pain, our suffering, it comes from being so deeply attached to these man-made labels. We treat them like they're the ultimate, absolute truth, when they're really just agreements. Okay, but how does this whole system actually lead to suffering? Well, the source material gives us this perfect little story that shows the two-step mistake we make pretty much constantly. You might think the problem starts when we slap a label like good or bad on something, but actually, it begins even earlier than that. It starts with the way we see the world in the first place, and this story explains it beautifully. So here's the story. There's this wife, and every single morning she looks out her kitchen window at her neighbor's house, and she always complains to her husband, saying something like, "Ugh, look at that. Why is their laundry always so dirty? Those clothes are just covered in stains." And this goes on and on. But then one morning, she looks out and she's just amazed. The clothes hanging on the line next door are sparkling clean. She runs to her husband and says, "Look, look, they finally learned how to wash their clothes properly." And her husband just smiles and says, "No, honey, I just got up a little early this morning and cleaned our window." And boom, that story just perfectly captures the two layers of error we're talking about. Step one is the dirty window itself, the error of our own senses. Our perception is never totally pure. It's always filtered through our mood, our past experiences, our biases, our own dirty window. Then comes step two. On top of that already flawed view, we pile on our conventions. We see what we think is dirty laundry, and we immediately layer on the judgment. They are bad at cleaning. So here's the bottom line. We suffer because we're reacting to a reality that's been distorted not once, but twice. First, it's distorted by our own flawed perception, the dirty window. And then it's distorted again by all the man-made labels and meanings we layer on top. We're treating this flawed, man-made view as if it's the absolute, unshakable truth. And that right there is a surefire recipe for pain. Okay, so that's a pretty powerful way to understand the problem, right? But so what? What's the solution? How does knowing all of this actually help us in our day-to-day lives? This is where it gets really practical. You can use this understanding as a tool. Just think for a second about what's causing you pain right now. Is it an insult someone threw at you? Well, what is that really? It's just a convention of language, agreed upon sounds that we've decided mean something negative. Are you stressing about a job title? That's just a convention of social status. What about that feeling of being a failure? That's you measuring yourself against a convention of expectation, a story somebody made up about where you're supposed to be. Now, the point here isn't to pretend these things don't exist. Of course they do. An insult still stings, the job title matters in the real world. The key, according to the source, is to simply see them for what they truly are. Powerful, yes, but ultimately, they're just man-made agreements. And when you can really truly see that it's all just a convention, it doesn't have to control you. You don't have to suffer for it. You can just let it be. You know, getting this concept is incredibly freeing. It's like it creates this little bit of space between an event and your reaction to it. It means you can still live in this world, play the game, participate in all these conventions, but you don't have to be a prisoner to them. And that insight right there is the first real step to freedom. So I want to leave you with one final big question to think about. If the reality you see every day, the world of insults and job titles, success and failure, good and bad, if that world is mostly just a shared agreement, then what's really real? What's left when you peel all those layers back?